Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello.
Hi. I'm just checking to make sure it hasn't started yet.
It hasn't started, but you should star 6 everyone who's not going to talk, and get yourself on mute so these sounds are a little better.
Okay, how do we mute ourselves again?
Star 6.
Star 6, okay.
You want us on mute or not?
I think I'm going to just put my words.
Excuse me, do you want all of us to be muted?
Yes.
Everybody mute. Mute.
You know what?
Hello, can you hear the governor?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay, take 4. Welcome, everybody. If you're on the line, please mute star 6. And thank you for joining. For those that may have been able to hear earlier, this is the 4th take, but we're happy to keep trying. If not successful,
we've lost you.
Okay, we're going to try again. We don't know why the technology is constantly muting us, but here's the governor, take 7.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent Basler. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for dialing in. We have with us here in the room tonight General Alan Dorman, State Health Officer Mylyn Tufte, Lieutenant Governor Brent Sanford, Superintendent Basler, and myself. My first question is, can you hear me? Yes. And the answer is yes. Okay, we have text confirmation. Take 7 is working. Thank you all for your patience. Thanks for dialing in. General Dorman and Officer Tufte are co-leaders of the Unified Command. Superintendent Basler will also sit on that along with dozens of other statewide leaders. We're bringing a whole of government, whole of community approach to addressing the first ever statewide emergency for a pandemic in North Dakota. The important role that as school leaders that you play is on 2 fronts. Because we have a dual battle that we're fighting here. Number one is the battle against COVID itself. This is a flu-like virus that has had less mortality among infants, children, and teenagers than the regular flu, the regular flu is something which you all deal with every year during flu season. We're still in flu season right now in North Dakota, so you're all very familiar with that. The statistics as of a couple days ago, there was 0 mortality of anybody under age 9. There was 1 death of someone under age 18. That was someone that had a teenager that had cystic fibrosis. If you're familiar with that disease, it's chronic, progressive, and fatal if untreated, with an average lifespan of under 30 years. And so again, to the school-age children that you're serving every day, this has less mortality rate than the flu. So then what is the role that schools can play? Presents a real concern based on the data that's available now. And again, that because this is a new virus, only identified by name on January 7th and has spread from China to other parts of the world, we don't have all the data that we might have on other flus that have been around for years. So we're still in the early stages of understanding the nature and the character of the virus in terms of its infection rate, its spread rate, et cetera. So still lots on the science side to continue to learn. We do know that it's spread through coughing and sneezing and hand contact. We do know that it can live on surfaces. We do know that the spread increases when people interact with each other in ways where they might be spreading the virus to each other in large congregate situations. And so we had released on Friday a set of guidelines based on thresholds, based on 1, 2, and 3, 1 being the least restrictive and 3 being the most. We'd also released on Friday 4 categories of kind of a decision tree for how you should make a decision on whether you'd close a school or not. And we were on the first level of those based on the fact that we only have 1 case. We had 11 more cases come back today, and we have all of those were negative. So we are still in a situation where we have only 1 positive case in the state of North Dakota. So the role that the schools can play is in helping us with the strategy of social distancing. Social distancing meaning reducing the contact between individuals and groups slows the rate of the spread. It does not eliminate the spread, it slows the rate of the spread. And for those people with math backgrounds know that we're talking about the area under a curve, and the area under the curve may not change from scenario 1 to scenario 2, but if it's a very steep curve where a lot of infections come and a lot of critical illness come at the same time, that's when we overwhelm our health system. And our health system includes our long-term care, our clinics, and our hospitals in the state of North Dakota. In advanced stages of this is a respiratory disease, becomes fatal like pneumonia might for an older person, or the flu might for someone who's got an underlying health disease. One of the critical aspects of care is access to intensive care or isolation units where we can slow the spread and also access to ventilators. So over the weekend, we became aware that as we did more digging into the health system, that there may be, we understood some of the upper limits of that and understood that we could overwhelm our system here in North Dakota. Typically, if you've got a crisis that's regional in nature, then you might say, hey, we need 200 more ventilators in North Dakota, and somebody ships them up from Minneapolis. But we're guessing that every other part of the country is going to need all the ventilators they need, and so there could be a supply shortage. We also have got a workforce shortage of healthcare workers. We're short about 1,000 nurses, and so this is a preemptive strategy to try to increase the amount of social distancing, to slow the rate of the spread of the virus, to help. So by closing schools, we know that we're creating a series of unintended challenges the unintended effects that can come from that, whether it's nutrition, whether it's special ed, whether it's working parents, all the things. And unintended would be if we close schools and then the parents are working and the kids go stay with their grandparents who are part of a more vulnerable population. That's not what we're not trying to achieve that. So again, we talk about the need for individual responsibility, where we're trying to basically not have the focus on, the focus will be on schools are closing. That's huge news. But the message that we need your help in driving through is the individual responsibility about hygiene, covering coughs, staying home from work if you're not well, and making sure that the students who can be carriers stay away from the vulnerable populations. We know that there are a number of other things, whether it's nutrition, whether it's special ed, whether it's activities, whether it's waivers, that there's a lot of unanswered questions. As part of the emergency order tonight, where we ask schools to close for 5 days, we are asking that essential personnel and leadership show up tomorrow, either in person or dialing in, depending on how you're structuring your meetings. But that there's work that's being done on building plans for how we sustain ourselves in the weeks and months ahead to deliver education to the students of North Dakota. And we do that in a way that provides that in a safe, healthy environment. And we do that in a way where we can create an environment for the students that's based on facts, not fear. And so that leads me to the second element. So the first way that you can help in this emergency situation we're in is through your collaboration on planning for how we manage through the school closures. The second is the information battle, because we are fighting, and I would say sometimes I'm worried that we're losing the battle on the fear versus facts, that over the weekend fear seemed to get a little bit of a run ahead on facts, and we want to make sure that we're balancing those two things, and that you as leaders in your community can be well informed about what we're doing. And part of that well-informed is we're not closing schools because we think that students are at risk of a health issue. We're closing schools because we're trying to reduce the amount of contact and we're trying to reduce the spread. We're closing schools to protect the elderly in our population and those with chronic underlying health decisions. It would be perfectly safe for kids to have gone to school, and particularly in the cases where right now we have no evidence that there's any COVID cases in any of the schools today. So again, trying to stamp down the fear and focus on the facts is a key role that you can play as we go forward. We know that there are going to be a lot of questions that are unanswered as of tonight, but we look forward to working with you in the days ahead to build plans that will make sure that we're achieving our educational goals that we have for all of our students in the state, achieving our special education needs, and filling the important role we play on nutrition, helping make sure that the behavioral health role that we're playing in supporting these students. I'm reminded that we're coming into April, and April has been historically the highest suicide rate month in the state of North Dakota. And we are certainly in a situation where, at the current course and trajectory, we could have many other disease classes at the end of 2020 that will have had a higher mortality rate in North Dakota than this, and that'll include, overdoses, traffic deaths, the flu itself, or suicide. And so again, we want to make sure that while we're all preoccupied with COVID-19, that we're keeping an eye on the overall health responsibilities that we have for students in the state population, and that we as adults make sure that we maintain our understanding of the proportionality of what we're up against. And so we continue to use this as a springboard to maybe make progress. I mean, it'd be fantastic if April has been our leading month, whether we're in school or out of school, we're doing such a great job that we had 0 suicides in the month of April. I mean, let's set that a goal for ourselves to do that. But that's going to require, again, the role here is to make sure that we're providing leadership at the K-12 level, both in terms of how we manage school closures and eventually school reopenings, but also how we manage information. So thank you for your important role on both of those aspects. I'm going to take a break and hope that everybody heard this after our 6 false starts.
So
any feedback online that people are hearing? We're getting some text coming in. People could hear. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Baszler, and then also General Dorman, maybe some comments about how we're standing up the Unified Command tomorrow, and how we will involve K-12 in that. Superintendent Baszler, any?
So, yeah, there's some questions coming in. I think you have access to several people in the room. I know that many of you have my cell phone number. You all have my email address. If you can send your questions to me via email or text message. Maria Nessett is in the room as well, as is Jay Spieler. I believe many of you have their cell phone numbers. I think if we could deliver the questions via email or text message, that might be a little bit more organized. With that, I will just say I know that there are a lot of questions, having come with many over the past several days about what the next steps. So we're trying to take this first order, second order, third order, and questions and answers and plans that we need to move through. As we move through this day, there were some steps. We need to make one decision and then the next decision and then the next decision. So the first step that we needed to take today and tonight was to announce that the schools were closed and student attendance are going to be affected. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they are wanting to know about what comes next. And so we hope that your staff will be able to help you, and district will take the lead. So first questions are, number one, if we could clarify, are tribal schools involved in this? So we've talked about public and non-public. And when we say non-public, that includes our BIE schools, our private schools, our schools that are YCC, that are Dakota Boys Ranch, that are all of the above for non-public schools. So when we talk about public and non-public, BIE tribal schools are included in that. Another question, if we can classify what essential staff means. Essential personnel. Is that just teaching staff, or is that school, cooks, janitors, aides, etc.?
And I think on that one, we'd leave that up to the superintendents. They're on the call. Have everybody come in tomorrow that you need to help build your plans on how we safely reopen. That would be we should be working on plans on how to safely reopen as opposed to working on plans on how do we stay closed for the rest of the school year. Staying closed for the rest of the school year would create another set of issues that we have to plan for. But for right now, you should be thinking about what it would take to safely reopen. Would that mean even more restrictions on access, no parents in the school, canceling parent-teacher conferences, making sure we got enough thermometers to do forehead temperature readings when people come in, so only healthy kids are in the school. There's a number of things between being open and being closed that could be developed with good planning. We would look for great ideas coming out of school districts with local leadership, trying to create plans and ideas that could be shared with others. But let's put our heads together and figure out a way to be able to safely offer educational services and do that in a healthy way, because if we can do that, then that is, that will take pressure off parents that are working in the medical fields. It'll take pressure off parents that are working in law enforcement, first responder, take take pressure off of working parents. I mean, there's a lot of benefits that go on when schools are operating in addition to the educational and nutritional components. And so, again, the ask that we have for you is build plans on how to think about how to safely reopen.
And I would say then, as schools, as superintendents work with their school boards on these issues, who is it that you need to plan? Who is it that you need at the table these next couple of days to plan for reopening and how to plan for the delivery of food services and all of those other things that are being asked of you? Local, it's going to look different in every school district across the state, as to who will need to be at that table making decisions. Maybe they don't need to all come in at the same time, but there might be a variety. But again, the local school administrators know their communities best and they know their personnel best. There have been another question about child care services in school. Now, I know Minnesota came out with some very prescriptive guidance and very detailed guidance about what schools would do. Again, I know the complexity of the different diversity of the school districts across the state. It's important to involve your local community leaders, your school boards in these decisions. What's going to work for Fargo and be necessary in Fargo is not necessarily going to be what's needed in Bowman or in Wilton. So work with your community leaders whether or not schools will be providing child care services. That's not something that we would dictate at the state. Another question, I think we've answered this one. Are classified employees to be paid during closure? The conversation about.
Help me understand the question on the pay thing. Is I think we're at a point right now where we're not trying to make any definitive announcements one way or another. I just want to assure people that if you're under contract and doing the work that's being asked of you, we're under a state of emergency. I know that there may be some economic concerns and fears, but let's address those as we walk through them this week, because that's not what's driving this right now at all. We know that this is unprecedented times. I mean, the Federal Reserve today lowered the Fed's fund rate, the borrowing rate to zero. That's never happened before. The federal government's talking about billions of dollars of assistance going out to try to support the economy, and we'll be addressing the economic impacts as part of our unified command. Our approach includes four tracks within the unified command. One of those is economic, and we know that the recession that is likely starting and accelerating right now is going to have an impact on the entire state, and so we'll be looking at all of that within context.
Very good.
What does that mean?
Details about school lunch provision. One of the waivers that we received today was the ability to move immediately into the summer food service program, which means that we don't need to wait until June, allows us to provide school lunch and breakfast at all of our sites that are free and reduced. It is also allowing us to do non-congregate food service, which is brown bag versus coming to the school cafeteria. So again, as you work the next couple of days to develop your plans about how you and your school district are going to provide those meal services, please work with the Department of Public Instruction, Linda Schleyer and her team at Child Nutrition. You know are standing ready, and we can help you work through those plans. But we have been given the green light to do the summer food service program in these unexpected closure days.
I heard someone ask me, what did that mean on my answer, but let me just be clear if you didn't listen, if people weren't on the press conference. We switched last year from days to minutes for instructional time. Hours, I'm sorry. Well, I'm being corrected, it's hours, but it turns out an hour is made up of 60 minutes, so we're doing it by minutes. So anyway, we have hours, not days. Virtually everybody on this call is in a school district that does more hours per day than is required by law. And so I'm confident that in virtually all cases, we take 5 days off, that if people are worried about getting paid, you will be for this week because you've already delivered that educational amount. I mean, these would be days that would fall under the waiver just like just like we had a storm day for huge storm for 5 days, then we go back and look at, are they meeting the educational requirements, and you don't have to add more days on the end of the school year. So I would think that just about everybody on this call is in that situation. There may be an exception or two to that rule, but that can be addressed down the road. But right now, I would just say there should not be a concern about these 5 days, and part of these 5 days is for us to do the planning around those questions. So I would say keep the questions coming. We're not trying to deflect questions. We want to articulate questions. We want to develop plans, and we want to make sure that we've got a solid FAQ for you and your parents, for the parents and the teachers and the staff and the paras and everybody, as we move through this in a couple of days, that we'll have better and more complete answers. But for right now, I would just try to eliminate that fear, because we've delivered more instructional time than is required by law up to this point. I think there have been very few, there have been some blizzard days in parts of the state, but we are in pretty good shape, I think.
Governor, I'm getting some follow-up questions on that. So the clarity that I think they're seeking, teachers will get paid because they're on contract, but the question is, should they pay their classified staff who punch in and punch out should they pay them their regular weekly wages, professional bus drivers, crossing guards? My advice on that is we're going to need some guidance on you. Again, you as each individual school district are going to need to take a look at what your reserve funding is and what your budgets are, have some conversations with your school boards about what the direction would be. We will also need, I think before the governor or anyone at the state can make a blanket decision on that, we're going to need to know the economics and the specific facts and the data about what that would mean. And so again, that's going to look differently. We're going to rely a lot on local school superintendents with their boards and business managers to determine what the economics of that really means and what is in local reserve funding at this point. Do we need a plan for online? So I believe that, as we stated in the school at the press conference on Friday, there are some school districts that may be able to viably get that up and running. But there are other school districts that are not going to be able to do that. The one-to-one devices, the devices that are available at home for multiple students. Again, if you are a school district that has the opportunity to do this, please use the next 2 or 3 days to determine what that might look like in your school district. Propose those plans to the Department of Public Instruction and with the governor's office, and we can review those. The equity issues that are absolutely a concern and a federal requirement. There are equity issues for students that are on IEP. There's access. The federal law is very clear that if you are not closing school and you are providing instructional services to some students, you must provide the service to all students, whether they have special educational needs or not. So please take that into consideration as you're developing your local plans. A question here of must you provide meals? I think there's a lot of fear among our Department of Human Service folks that there are some students within each one of our communities that will be in food insecurity without that school breakfast and school lunch program. So again, have those conversations at your local level, determine what your free and reduced rate is and the number of students that are participating in your school breakfast and lunch programs. If you have the large majority of your students receiving those services, I would recommend, in order to provide the security and safety that our students deserve at these challenging times, to consider what your school could do.
Another question that we got was, are families who've traveled going to be restricted? Now that we've closed the schools, this is less of an issue, but we do ask that if people have been traveling to areas of known contact, they go to the Department of Health website, they fill out a form, they'll be followed up with some instructions that come back to them depending on where they've been and who they might have been exposed to. They'll be asked to self-isolate for 14 days. And that's been going on since we started this thing, so that's the standard practice that we have from there. Each school district, if you even among the staff that you've got coming in the next 2 days to help on the planning, if you've got concerns about someone who may have been traveling, feel free to ask them to dial in versus come in.
So I think one of the questions here, the plan is for 5 days, but is there a plan or a likelihood to extend like other states?
Well, the planning part of that is what's supposed to go on the next couple of days, which is we need your help to help build those plans under different scenarios, whether we need to stay closed for, 2 weeks, 3 weeks through the end of the school year, but at some point we're reopening. So that's part of the planning, and the reopening, whether we reopen in a week or in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, is going to try to be based on the data. The data will be how we doing relative to the rate of infection spread, how we doing relative to our healthcare readiness, how we doing on protecting our elderly, how we doing on getting more testing done in North Dakota. So those are some of the factors that we'll be looking at, and we'll be providing guidance next weekend on whether we will extend or not. What other states do is up to other states and up to their situation that they have, and every state's got a different situation right now in terms of their rate of infection and in terms of their medical capacity.
I think another question that we have, how does this work with dual credit classes? Each school district is working with a different institution of higher ed. Some are working with State College of Science, some are working with Lakes Region, some are working with Bismarck State College. I would say that as administrators, reach out to each of the administrators of those campuses and determine what their plan is for dual credit courses.
Yeah, and they're in each, the different higher education institutions had different plans in terms of when they were opening and closing and when they were coming back after spring break. But I know that all of them are working on plans to maintain online learning after some period of time. And so my hope would be that the dual credit classes could continue if they're primarily online.
There's been a question that some of the answers and questions are not getting through or they're not hearing the responses. How can they follow up? So this call is being recorded by the staff at the Department of Public Instruction as well as the Teams mechanism. Our staff will collect these frequently asked questions, post the question and the answer, and we'll post that online. We have on our banner, we have the COVID-19 updates. Please look there for these questions. Let's see. IEP deadlines are due this week. Do we hold them by teleconference or reschedule? Again, I'm not sure what the number of IEPs might be. It's going to be different for each school district. If there's one, it might be good to hold those. If not, again, our staff, Jerry Tevens and her special education staff, can help guide you through these things as we move through the next several days. To the governor's point earlier, we will revisit this, and after 5 days, a lot of changes will be happening.
Okay. Another question, should there be a plan for long-term situation distance learning? The answer is yes. That should be part of the assignment for developing the plans. Question, is there going to be another conference call on Monday? That's TBD. I'm sure we'll have one for sure by the end of day Tuesday, but let's use tomorrow right now to try to get work done and then submit questions, and we'll keep working on trying to put up the FAQs online to answer the questions as they're coming in.
Question about, do we offer lunch and breakfast for all students or just free and reduced? With the authority from the USDA this weekend, it is being able to be offered to all students with the Summer Food Service Program authority. Asking for suggestions on how to get meals to students. There has been you can have them pick them up at the cafeteria, at your school site, in parking lots have been some suggestions of other school districts. I believe there can be a lot of sharing going on among school districts for these ideas. The other opportunity that is available, we have verified with the U.S. Department of Ag that schools can actually deliver these brown bag meals to the homes and to students.
Okay, the question was how can we get our hands on thermometers? This is one of the questions for the Unified Command that we'll be working with. I'm sure there's going to be a supply chain challenge with that, meaning there's going to be a nationwide shortage, but we'll find out what we have available either through our medical cache or available through other resources. But make plans based on your available people and resources, and then if you identify resource constraints, that's one of the things that we would try to, again, on a macro basis, add up all of your plans and go what would be needed, and then we can make if needed, a single request.
Just one second. Find it again. Okay, so, have we disseminated out who specifically we should get online plans approved by, Joe or Divide and Conquer? So the plans should be submitted to my email address, and we will disseminate them within the office. So at this point, as you know, there was a bill introduced in the 2019 session to have online plans given the authority to be provided. In the absence of that, I will be working with the governor because he's the only one that has the authority to approve online learning at this point as a substitute for face-to-face instructional time. So submit them to me at me at the Department of Public Instruction. We will review and work with our local leaders, and of course, then the final authority will come from the governor.
There's another question about classified staff and makeup days. But again, as I tried to describe on the hours versus days, if you are hours ahead, and you've banked all those hours, then these 5 days this week will not require a makeup, and they won't even require a request to the governor's office. They won't require a waiver because you will be ahead of your instructional hours for the year. So that'd be one thing for each school district to take a look at. But if you're ahead, then these days will not need to be made up.
So, question for you, Governor. The governor explained one of the reasons for closure is for districts to spend the next few days planning for conditions of reopening. Would you rather our time and efforts be spent on plans for extended absences, alternative teaching, meal distribution, or planning for the measures that we would need to take to reopen after the week-long closure?
How about you do them all? I mean, you guys are leaders. You're leading your organizations. You're managing 110,000 people across the state of North Dakota. We're spending $2 billion on K-12. I think it's reasonable to expect that you would do plans on extended absence, alternative teaching, meal distribution, planning for measures to reopen after the week-long closure. Do it all. I mean, that's the expectation we have. We have a high expectation, and I'm expecting to see it fulfilled because we got people working 24 hours a day at the state of North Dakota, and there's no reason why, as you're part of this team, to be the solution on one of the biggest challenges we face, that you shouldn't be doing the same thing.
Question, how do you provide distance learning for elementary students? I would say, again, if your school district is not set up for that, you haven't planned for that, it would be best then to just focus on how you will make up instructional time for elementary students versus online learning plans at this point.
Okay, we got time for one or two more questions, then I've got to jump to a call with all the medical organizations across the state. So is there one or two we can take? If not, the ones that are coming in, we'll get them up on the FAQ. Again, I want to just close with a thank you to all of you for your time tonight. Appreciate everything that you're doing, and everything you're doing to lead through this. Thank you for the effort you're putting into planning. Thanks for your staff. Thanks for being a voice, not just about school closures, but a voice in the community about the facts that this is not serious health threat to anyone in K-12, but identifying the interactions between K-12 students and the vulnerable population is key in trying to reduce that. That's really critical. One last question that came in was, will there be any suggestions for closures for movie theaters, other areas to make real social distancing a better possibility? All that's going to be addressed tomorrow, but right now we're asking for private sector leaders, whether it's movie theaters or malls, whatever, we're asking them to apply that. It was Parks and Rec. Hey, Parks and Rec, if you want to go outside, great. If you're 6 feet away from anybody, that's great. Go spend some time outside tomorrow. As I said, we are not canceling fishing season in North Dakota. So it is this is an opportunity, again, we said, to reconnect with family, read a book, take a master class, do a Khan Academy course. I would be encouraging your students, even if it's out of the formal learning, to try to figure out ways to use this time to reset, or give them some homework that they can do over the next weeks, including writing a letter to a teacher or coach that made a difference in their life. That'd be a good assignment to give everybody while they're home.
I'm going to close with two questions, actually three questions. Just repeating again, I know we had some late additions. This does include BIE and tribal schools, because the announcement was for all public and non-public. The final thing is, will we be meeting again on this? No, I don't anticipate that we're going to schedule that call now, but likely Tuesday. We're not going to do this Monday. Please refer to the Department of Health website, to the Department of Public Instruction website, and
Okay, thank you, everybody.